Lena had always known the stars were calling her. Ever since she was a child, the glint of distant lights in the night sky had filled her with wonder. The stories her grandmother told her about the Orbital Fortress, a colossal structure suspended in the darkness of space, were like dreams, tales of an ancient empire long gone, a place of forgotten power. Her grandmother had always spoken of it with reverence, almost as if it were alive, waiting for someone to return. But over time, those stories faded. The galaxy moved on. The Orbital Fortress became nothing more than a myth, a relic from a time when empires fought for control of the stars. The Galactic Council insisted that it was an abandoned outpost long forgotten. No one thought about it. No one remembered. Except Lena. The voice had come in the dead of night, a whisper that stirred something deep inside her. At first, it had been nothing more than a vague feeling, a sense of something pulling her toward the stars. But as the days passed, it became clearer. The whispers turned to words, and finally, one night, there it was. Lena, come home. Lena had frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had tried to brush it off as a dream, a trick of her imagination. But the voice had returned, stronger this time, more insistent. It wasn't just a dream, it was real. The Orbital Fortress was alive, and it was calling her. She didn't know how or why, but she had to go. Lena had spent her life as an engineer, working in the quiet hum of laboratories and workshops on Earth's orbital stations. She was nothing special by the galaxy's standards, just one of millions who built ships and maintained the systems that kept humanity connected to the stars. She was content with her life, until now. Now the call to the stars had become impossible to ignore. The night before her departure, Lena sat alone in her tiny apartment, staring at the stars outside her window. The city below hummed with life, oblivious to the pull that had taken hold of her. She had kept the whispers a secret, never telling anyone about the strange feelings she had. But now, as the sun set, she knew what she had to do. Packing only what she needed, she grabbed her old transport pod's keys and made her way to the launch bay. She had a destination, the Orbital Fortress. It was a lonely journey. The pod was small, a simple transport craft not meant for long space flights, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was the destination, the fortress. Lena gazed out of the small window as the Earth grew smaller behind her. The familiar, comforting view of home began to fade, replaced by the vast emptiness of space. It should have been terrifying, but to her, it felt like freedom. It felt like coming home. She didn't know how long the journey would take, but she had no other choice. The voice had promised her that everything she sought, all the answers she needed, were waiting for her in that dark place, in the heart of the Orbital Fortress. As the days passed, Lena's mind raced with questions. What was waiting for her there? Why had the fortress chosen her? She had never considered herself important, just a small piece of a much larger universe. But now the voice had brought her here, and she knew there was no going back. She passed the time reading old star maps, checking systems, and listening to the quiet hum of the engine. The silence of space was overwhelming at times, but also comforting. It was a space where nothing could distract her from the purpose that was now clear in her mind. Weeks later, as the pod neared the location of the fortress, Lena's pulse quickened. There in the distance, she saw it, the Orbital Fortress. It was more magnificent than she could have imagined, an ancient structure, colossal in size, hanging like a shadow against the black canvas of space. The fortress had been a myth, a mystery, a legend, but now it was real, and it was waiting for her. As Lena's pod approached the fortress, a deep, mechanical voice crackled over the comms, sending a chill down her spine. Access code required. She froze, her fingers trembling as she reached for the console. She had no idea what the access code could be. She had never been told. But then, in the deepest part of her heart, the answer came. Her childhood name, the one she had forgotten. The one her grandmother had whispered to her when she was small, the name she had once thought was just a piece of a forgotten past. Lena hesitated for a moment, but the voice in her mind urged her forward. Lena Ivana Salas. She whispered it, almost too softly to hear, but as soon as the words left her lips, the fortress responded. The voice came again, softer this time, almost with reverence. Access granted. Welcome home, Lena Ivana Salas. The doors of the Orbital Fortress opened. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she guided her pod into the massive entrance, the walls of the fortress towering above her. She could feel the power, the weight of ancient history pressing down on her. For the first time in her life, Lena knew she was where she belonged. She wasn't just a wanderer. She wasn't just an engineer. She was the heir to something far older and far greater than herself. The fortress had chosen her, and she was ready to find out why. The air inside the orbital fortress was thick with history. Lena's heart raced as her transport pod glided deeper into the ancient structure. The walls, once dark and silent, now hummed with the slow, steady beat of energy. The fortress was waking, and Lena could feel its power vibrating through her very bones. She had imagined this moment for years, but now that it was real, the weight of it settled heavily on her shoulders. The walls of the fortress stretched endlessly above her, adorned with symbols she didn't recognize, their meanings lost in time. The air smelled faintly of metal, dust, and something else, something old, something alive. Her boots echoed softly against the floor as she stepped out of the pod, her eyes wide with awe. The inside of the fortress was cavernous, like a city built for giants. Towering columns of metal supported a high, arched ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity. The lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the floor. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the hum of distant machinery and the soft click of Lena's footsteps. She instinctively reached for her comm unit, but before she could speak, the voice from the fortress echoed in her mind, sending a shiver down her spine. "Lena Ivana Salis, welcome home." Her pulse quickened. "Home," she whispered to herself. What did that mean? Had this place always been waiting for her? Was it truly her destiny to unlock whatever secrets this fortress held? Suddenly, the silence was broken by a low rumble, followed by a soft mechanical whir. A doorway opened before her, vast and imposing, and the same voice spoke again. "Come forward, the core awaits." Lena's feet moved of their own accord. She didn't know why, but something deep inside her urged her to follow. The voice was more than a command. It was a pull, a calling. Her curiosity grew stronger with each step. She had spent her entire life on Earth, listening to the stories of ancient technologies, myths of lost empires, but nothing could prepare her for this. The reality was more powerful than any story. She walked for what felt like hours, but there was no real sense of time in the fortress. The corridors twisted and turned, leading her deeper into its heart. Strange lights flickered, casting odd reflections on the walls. There was no sign of anyone else, no other life forms, only Lena and the hum of the fortress, alive with energy, guiding her forward. Finally, she entered a large chamber, and the moment she stepped inside, the air shifted. The lights intensified, revealing a massive console at the center of the room. The console was circular, its surface covered in glowing patterns that pulsed with a soft blue light. It seemed ancient, yet impossibly advanced, the technology unlike anything Lena had ever seen. At the center of the console was a pedestal, and upon it sat an object glowing faintly. It looked like a sphere, but it was not made of any material Lena recognized. The sphere seemed to hum with its own energy, its surface shifting, almost as if it were alive. "Touch it," the voice commanded, its tone gentle yet insistent. Lena hesitated. Her hand hovered above the sphere, her fingers tingling with a strange energy. What was this? Was this the power the fortress had been hiding all these years? Was it truly meant for her? "Touch it," the voice repeated louder now. With a deep breath, Lena placed her hand on the surface of the sphere. The moment she made contact, a wave of energy surged through her, overwhelming her senses. For a split second, it felt as if her entire body was being pulled apart, her mind filled with visions, distant memories, images of battles long past, and faces she had never seen. The fortress, once a place of unimaginable power, seemed to speak directly to her. She saw herself, or someone who looked like her, standing in front of a battlefield, leading an army of thousands. She was commanding the forces of an ancient empire, standing tall and unyielding in the face of overwhelming odds. The image faded almost as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Lena breathless and trembling. "What was that?" she whispered, stepping back from the sphere. "The memories of those who came before you," the voice replied. "You are the last of the lineage, the heir to the power of the old empire. The fortress is yours to command." Lena's head spun. The last of the lineage, heir to the empire. This couldn't be real. She was just Lena Ivana Salis, a simple engineer. How could she be the heir to an ancient empire? But deep down, she felt the truth in the voice's words. She didn't understand how or why, but she felt the weight of something ancient stir inside her. She touched the sphere again, this time with more confidence, her heart racing with anticipation. The blue light flickered and then steadied. Slowly, the holographic images around her shifted, revealing a vast star map, one she had never seen before. The map showed stars, planets, and regions of space long forgotten, territories once ruled by the empire that had built the orbital fortress. "You will lead the restoration of the empire," the voice said, as if this was a simple fact. "The galaxy is fractured, but it can be unified again. The forces of the galaxy will challenge you, but you will not fail. The power is within you, Lena Ivana Salas." Lena stumbled back, her mind reeling. 1,000 questions flooded her consciousness. The power, the empire, what was it asking of her? How could she, one woman, one engineer, restore an empire, much less unite the galaxy? It was impossible. She wasn't a ruler. She wasn't a conqueror. She was just Lena. But the voice was calm, almost reassuring. "You are the heir, you are the key. The galaxy needs you. The fortress needs you." The map before her pulsed, and Lena's gaze locked onto one particular star system. It glowed brighter than the others, marking it as something important. "Your first task awaits," the voice continued. "The enemy stirs, you must act." Lena felt her heart skip a beat. The weight of her destiny, of the Empire's legacy, suddenly became too much to bear. She had never asked for this. She had never wanted this. But here she was, standing in the heart of a forgotten empire, the fate of the galaxy resting on her shoulders. Taking a deep breath, she whispered, "What do I need to do?" The voice was silent for a moment before answering, its tone somber. "You will fight." Lena stared at the star map that glowed before her, her heart pounding. She was standing at the very heart of the orbital fortress, an ancient and powerful relic of a lost empire. The holographic star system that pulsed in front of her seemed to call out to her, its lights blinking in rhythmic patterns like an urgent signal. The voice, that cold yet familiar presence, had just told her that she would lead the restoration of the empire, but it also told her that she would face an enemy. "The enemy stirs," the voice had said. Lena hadn't fully grasped the meaning until now, standing alone in the glowing chamber. The reality of it was hitting her harder than she expected. Lena shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. How could she, a simple engineer from Earth, be expected to lead, to fight? Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. But the pull of the fortress was undeniable. There was something inside her that couldn't ignore what was happening. She had been chosen, and the galaxy needed her. As she stood frozen, the voice spoke again, its tone calm but insistent. "The enemy is already in motion. Their forces are vast and they are drawing close. You must act now, Lena Ivana Salas. Your first task awaits." Lena's chest tightened. She took a deep breath. "What enemy?" she whispered. "Who are they?" The star map shifted, the bright system in front of her zooming in. A small planet on the edge of the galaxy appeared, a world she recognized. It was Kyria, a small but strategic planet in the outer rim, known for its resources, which had been left largely undisturbed by the galactic powers. But the planet wasn't the key to the war. No, it was the fleet that had appeared near it. "They are called the Tzarii," the voice said, its tone colder now. "A ruthless faction who has long desired the power of the ancient empire. They will stop at nothing to see it fall into their hands." Tzarii. Lena had never heard of them, but the name alone sent a shiver down her spine. Who were these people, and why did they want the power of the fortress? More importantly, why had they come for her now? The holographic map zoomed further in, showing massive Tzarii ships orbiting Kyria. They were preparing for a strike. The enemy was close, too close. Lena glanced back at the pedestal that held the glowing sphere. It was her only connection to the fortress, her only link to whatever legacy the voice had promised her. She had no choice but to trust it, no choice but to act. The galaxy's future was in her hands. Taking a steadying breath, Lena activated the comms and opened a communication channel with the fortress. "Command Center, this is Lena Ivana Salas. I understand what I need to do. Prepare the fleet." The corridors of the orbital fortress seemed to stretch endlessly as Lena moved through them, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her every step. Every inch of the fortress seemed alive with energy. The walls thrummed with power, as if they were waiting for her to unlock their potential, to tap into whatever strength lay buried in the heart of this ancient place. Lena stepped into the war room, where the map of Kyria and the Tzarii fleet glowed above a long table. It was a simple yet imposing space. The walls were adorned with symbols from a long-lost empire, each one etched deeply into the metal as though they had been carved by time itself. The room was empty, save for a single figure standing in the corner, the holographic projection of a warrior. It was the same figure that had greeted Lena earlier, the one from her visions. The warrior was tall and imposing, wearing armor that reflected the ancient might of the empire. His glowing blue visor seemed to study her, a silent guardian of the fortress. "The time has come, Lena Ivana Salas," the figure said. "You must decide. The Tzarii fleet will reach Kyria within hours. If you do not act swiftly, they will seize the planet and the fortress will be vulnerable. You are the key to its power. You must unlock the next phase." Lena nodded, though a deep fear settled in her stomach. Unlock the next phase. She had no idea what that meant, but she had no choice. This was why she had come. This was why she had been chosen. She stepped forward, her fingers trembling as she approached the console. "Tell me what to do," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. The figure's glowing eyes focused on her. "Activate the weapon systems. Draw the Tzarii fleet into the gravity well of Kyria. The fortress holds enough power to destroy their ships before they even reach the planet." "Destroy them?" Lena repeated, her breath catching in her throat. Was that what it would take? She had been expecting something different, a diplomatic solution, a way to end the conflict without bloodshed. But this was war, and the fortress was not a peaceful monument. It was a weapon. "This is the only way," the warrior said. "The Tzarii will not stop. Their ambitions are too great, and if you fail, the galaxy will fall into chaos once more." Lena swallowed hard. She had never wanted to be a leader, never wanted to command armies or destroy entire fleets. But the fortress had chosen her, and if she was to honor that, she had to fight. With a deep breath, she activated the controls. The room hummed to life, the fortress coming alive around her. Systems powered up, and the gravity well of Kyria began to pull at the Tzarii fleet. For the first time, Lena felt the power at her fingertips. It was overwhelming, and for a brief moment, she hesitated. The lives of thousands, maybe millions, depended on her. Could she do this? Could she take the life of the enemy to protect the galaxy? Then the voice of the fortress echoed in her mind, steady and unyielding. "You are the heir. You are the protector. The galaxy needs you. Do not hesitate." And so she made the call. The Tzarii fleet was dragged into the gravity well, their ships caught in a force so powerful they had no chance of escape. The fortress unleashed its full might, and the battle was over before it had even begun. The Tzarii were destroyed, their fleet torn apart in a flash of light. Lena stood there, her heart racing. The Tzarii had been defeated, but the cost of that victory echoed in her mind. She had taken a life. She had become the leader the galaxy needed. She had unlocked the fortress's power. The silence that followed was deafening. But somewhere deep inside, Lena knew this was only the beginning. Lena stood at the center of the war room, staring at the screen where the debris of the Tzarii fleet scattered across the vastness of space. The light from the destruction glinted in the cold expanse, but there was no joy in Lena's heart. She had done what was necessary. She had destroyed their fleet. The gravity well of Kyria had swallowed them whole, and with it, the enemy had been erased. But the price of victory weighed heavily on her. The fortress had powered down, its systems humming softly as if resting after unleashing such a devastating force. Lena could still feel the tremors of that moment, the rush of power, the overwhelming sense of control. She had commanded the fortress, and the Tzarii had crumbled before her. But even as she stood there, the hollow echo of her actions reverberated in her chest. "You did what had to be done," the voice of the fortress whispered, its tone softer than before. Lena clenched her fists at her sides, trying to calm the tumult inside her. She had acted out of necessity. She had chosen the galaxy over the lives of the enemy. But the weight of it, the feeling of having decided who would live and who would die, sat heavily on her heart. Hours passed, and Lena wandered the vast halls of the fortress, her steps echoing through the empty corridors. The walls, once cold and distant, now seemed to be watching her. She felt every inch of their ancient presence pressing in on her. She wasn't sure where she was going, but something deep inside urged her forward, as if the fortress itself were guiding her. Her mind kept circling back to the question that had been haunting her since the battle ended. Had she done the right thing? She couldn't answer that, but the voice had been clear: the Tzarii had to be stopped, or they would have continued their conquest, bringing chaos to the galaxy. Lena had been given the power to end it, and she had used it. But now, as she walked deeper into the heart of the fortress, Lena realized there was something else she had to face: the consequences of what she had done. She wasn't just a survivor of an ancient empire, she was its heir. The power she wielded came with responsibility, and that responsibility was now her burden to carry. The sound of footsteps broke through the silence. Lena turned, her hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm she no longer needed, but her fingers closed around empty air. The steps were familiar, comforting. A figure stepped out from the shadows. It was the same warrior from earlier, the holographic projection that had spoken to her when she first arrived. His blue visor gleamed in the low light, his face still hidden beneath his helmet. "Lena Ivana Solace," the figure said, his voice reverberating with authority. "The Tizari have been vanquished and the galaxy is safe for now, but there are consequences to your actions. You must understand this." Lena stood tall, meeting the figure's gaze through the visor. "I know. I destroyed their fleet and I saved Kyria, but at what cost?" The figure tilted his head slightly. "The Tizari were a threat, but there are those who will see your actions as a signal. The galaxy will notice what you've done. They will see the power you hold and they will fear it." Lena felt a chill run down her spine. She had thought of the Tizari as an enemy, as a problem to be solved. But what about the rest of the galaxy? The Galactic Council? What would they think of the heir to the old empire, wielding the power of a weapon that could wipe out entire fleets? "What should I do?" Lena asked quietly. She wasn't sure if she was asking the warrior or herself. "What you do next will shape the future," the figure replied. "You are not just a commander of armies, you are a symbol. What you choose will determine whether the galaxy sees you as a protector or a tyrant." Lena swallowed hard. The weight of his words settled heavily on her. This was not just about saving the galaxy. It was about how she would be seen by everyone, friend, enemy, and everyone in between. And the galaxy was watching. She had made the first move, and now she had to figure out what kind of leader she would be. Days passed, and Lena spent them reflecting on the choices she had made and the ones that lay ahead. The fortress had become her home, a place where she could connect with her legacy, but also where the responsibility of that legacy weighed on her every thought. The voice of the fortress had spoken to her, guiding her, but it had not told her what came next. She was left to decide that herself. The galaxy was vast, and within it, there were many who would not take kindly to the return of the Empire's power. The Tizari were just one threat. The others would come, drawn by the same hunger for control. Lena sat before a screen, looking out at the stars beyond the fortress's walls. A communication request blinked on the screen, a message from Earth, from the Galactic Council. She hesitated, knowing this moment would come. But now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. Taking a deep breath, Lena accepted the message. A hologram flickered to life before her, Ambassador Zelkin, the Rethari representative. His face was tense, his eyes narrowing as he addressed her. "Lena Ivana Solace," he said, his voice carrying both respect and apprehension. "The galaxy watches you. Your actions against the Tizari have not gone unnoticed. But there is a question we must ask. What are your intentions? What role will you play in the future of the galaxy?" Lena looked at him, her heart racing. This was the moment she had been dreading. The galaxy now knew her name. They knew the power she commanded, and they were waiting for her answer. She stood tall, her back straight as she met his gaze. "I will not be a conqueror. I will not bring war to the galaxy, but I will not stand by and watch it fall to chaos. I will protect the innocent, and I will ensure that the mistakes of the past are never repeated." Zelkin's eyes softened, but the weight of his response was clear. "We will see if your actions match your words, Lena Ivana Solace. The galaxy will be watching." Lena ended the transmission, her mind swirling with what she had just said. Could she be the protector she claimed to be? Could she wield the power of the old empire and use it for good? She didn't know the answer yet, but one thing was clear: the path ahead would not be easy. The fortress, silent as always, seemed to watch her, waiting for her next move. Lena knew now that her journey was just beginning. The galaxy would either welcome her as a savior or fear her as a tyrant. But whatever the future held, she would face it head-on, with the legacy of an empire at her back and the weight of the galaxy in her hands. Lena sat alone in the war room, staring at the vast expanse of stars that filled the view beyond the fortress. The tension in the air was thick, and she could feel it deep in her bones. Every decision she had made up to this point had been a step into the unknown, a leap of faith. The galaxy had seen her actions, and now it was watching her, waiting to see what she would do next. Her conversation with Ambassador Zelkin still echoed in her mind. The Rethari, and by extension the entire Galactic Council, were wary of her. They had heard her words, but actions spoke louder than promises. Lena had given her word that she would protect the galaxy, but she had to prove herself. They wanted to know if she would uphold the ideals she had spoken of, or if she would fall into the same path as the empires that had come before her. The orbital fortress had once been the seat of an empire that ruled with an iron fist. Its walls had known the weight of power, of authority, and of ruthless control. But now the fortress was hers to command, and with it, the power to change the galaxy's fate. She had unlocked its secrets, harnessed its weapons, and used them to destroy the Tzarii. But now, as the echoes of that victory faded, Lena was left with one undeniable truth. She could never return to the life she once knew. She was no longer just an engineer. She was the heir to an ancient empire, and with that legacy came responsibility. Her fingers hovered over the console, a deep, unsettled feeling in her stomach. What would she do with this power? The Tzarii were just the beginning. The galaxy was fractured, divided, and the old wounds from centuries of war had not healed. She couldn't simply ignore the fractures that lay between the many species that called the stars their home. Lena had spent years living a quiet, unremarkable life. But now she was being asked to lead, to make decisions that would shape the future of billions. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier with each passing moment. Lena took a deep breath and stood up, her gaze fixed on the star map that hovered in front of her. She had to make her move. The first step in restoring peace to the galaxy was uniting the fractured factions. She couldn't do it alone, and she couldn't afford to wait any longer. The voice of the fortress echoed in her mind. The galaxy is divided. You must bring the factions together. The power of the empire is yours to wield, but you must forge alliances if you are to bring lasting peace. Lena nodded to herself. She had known that the next step would be a diplomatic one, but that didn't make it any easier. She wasn't used to leading, to convincing others to trust her. But there was no turning back now. If she was to restore the empire, she needed the support of the galaxy's leaders, the Galactic Council, the Rethari, the Krylian, and all the others. The first meeting was set, and Lena knew it would be critical. The Galactic Council had agreed to hear her out, but she couldn't expect them to give her their support easily. Not after the destruction of the Tzarii. The Council had long held the belief that humanity, and anyone with the power to disrupt the galaxy's fragile peace, was a threat. Lena entered the Council chamber, the silence heavy with anticipation. The members of the Council, representatives of the various species that spanned the galaxy, were seated around a large table. They eyed her warily, their expressions unreadable. They knew her name and they knew what she had done. But now they would learn what she planned to do next. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. The weight of their gaze was palpable, but she didn't falter. She had to be strong for herself, for Earth, and for the galaxy. I am Lena Ivana Salas, heir to the empire that once ruled these stars, she began, her voice steady. I know that my actions have raised questions and I understand your concerns, but I stand here today not as a conqueror but as a protector. The galaxy is fractured. We are all at risk from those who seek to control, to divide us. The Tzarii were only the beginning. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. She could see the tension in the room, but there was also something else, curiosity. She had their attention, and that was a start. I do not seek to rule, I seek to unite. The power of the orbital fortress is not mine to command alone. It is for all of us. Together we can rebuild this galaxy. But we must put aside our differences, our old grudges, and stand together. The choice is yours. The silence that followed was deafening. For a long moment, none of the council members spoke. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. Had she convinced them, or had she only given them more reasons to fear her? Then one of the representatives, Ambassador Zelkin, stood. His expression was serious, his eyes meeting hers. Your words are bold, Lena Ivana Salas, he said, his voice deep and thoughtful. And your actions have proven your strength, but we have long memories. The last empire fell because of its arrogance. How can we trust that you will not fall into the same traps? Lena's gaze never wavered. She knew this moment would come, and she was ready for it. I am not my ancestors, she said quietly. I will not make the same mistakes. I have seen the consequences of power used without wisdom. That is why I am here. I want to work with you, not against you. Zelkin paused as though considering her words. Then slowly he nodded. We shall see, he said. Lena exhaled, though she could feel the weight of the decision still hanging in the air. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The road ahead would not be easy, and there would be many more challenges, but for the first time she felt a flicker of hope. The council was not ready to give her their full support yet, But they hadn't rejected her either. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Later that night, as Lena stood on the observation deck of the fortress, looking out at the stars, she reflected on the conversation. The galaxy was filled with uncertainty, but she now knew what she had to do. She had to prove herself not just to the Council, but to everyone who had ever doubted her. The power of the fortress was hers, but it was not for her alone. It was for all of them. Her heart was heavy, but for the first time in a long while, she felt something else: determination. She wasn't just Lena Ivana Salas anymore. She was the heir to an ancient power, and the galaxy needed her to lead. She would not fail. Lena stood on the bridge of the orbital fortress, her fingers hovering over the controls. Outside the vast windows, the stars glimmered with quiet beauty, but beneath the surface, tension was building across the galaxy. The fragile peace that had followed her victory over the Tzarii was beginning to unravel. It had been weeks since the Galactic Council had agreed to support her efforts, not fully, but enough to give her a place at the table. Still, Lena knew she had earned only a temporary truce. Many saw her as a symbol of hope, a leader who could unite the galaxy's fractured factions. But there were just as many who viewed her as a threat, someone wielding the power of a forgotten empire with no clear intent. The message that had arrived earlier today confirmed her worst fears. A growing rebellion was stirring among some of the galaxy's most powerful factions. The Rithari, the Krylian, and the Brellians all had factions that now questioned her leadership. They whispered about the power of the fortress and whether she could be trusted not to repeat the mistakes of the old empire. And at the edges of the galaxy, smaller colonies were beginning to resist, worried that Lena would take the galaxy down a path of tyranny rather than peace. Lena clenched her fists at her sides, feeling the weight of the decisions ahead. Could she truly lead, unite the galaxy, or had she only opened the door to a new era of conflict? The doors to the bridge slid open, and Mara Ishin, her trusted advisor and friend, stepped inside. Her face was tight with concern. "Lena," Mara said quietly, "there's more news from the Council. Several of the Rithari delegates are calling for a vote of no confidence. They're questioning your ability to lead. They want to replace you." Lena's stomach churned. She had expected resistance, but to hear it so soon, so openly, felt like a punch to the gut. She had worked hard to earn their trust, to prove herself as someone who could bring them together. Now that hard work was crumbling. "What's the reason?" Lena asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mara looked at the floor for a moment before meeting Lena's gaze. "It's the power of the fortress. They're afraid of what you can do with it. They're afraid you'll turn into a dictator, ruling with an iron fist." Lena turned away, her hands gripping the railing in front of her. "They're right to be afraid," she whispered to herself. "I don't know how to wield this power. I'm not ready." "You're more ready than you think," Mara said gently, stepping closer. "You've already made the hard choice. You fought when you had to. Now you have to show them that you can lead with wisdom. You don't need to follow the old ways. You can forge a new path." Lena closed her eyes, drawing in a shaky breath. She had always been an engineer, someone who built things, who fixed things. She was not a ruler. The power of the orbital fortress had been thrust upon her, and with it, the weight of an empire's legacy. What if she failed? What if the galaxy fell into chaos again because of her? "I have to go," Lena said abruptly, turning away from Mara. "I need to speak with them. I need to show them I'm not a threat." Mara nodded but didn't move. "We'll stand with you, always." The council hall was filled with murmurs as Lena stepped through the doors. The members of the Galactic Council, representatives from dozens of species, sat in their seats, watching her with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. The air was thick with tension. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her, their expectations, their doubts. Lena stood before the table, her back straight, her hands clenched at her sides. She had come here to prove that she was not the leader they feared, that she wasn't just some relic of the past. But even as she prepared her words, doubt crept into her mind. Ambassador Zelkin, the Rithari representative, was the first to speak. His voice was calm, but the steel in his tone was unmistakable. "Lena Ivana Salas," he said, his gaze sharp, "the galaxy has watched your rise. We have seen the power you wield. But the question remains, are you truly capable of leading? Are you the protector of the galaxy you claim to be, or will you become just another ruler imposing your will on us all?" Lena's heart raced, but she steadied herself. "I am not a ruler," she began, her voice steady, "and I never will be. The power of the fortress does not make me a ruler. It makes me a protector. I stand before you today not as an empire's heir, but as a leader who will ensure that no one will ever have to live in fear again, not under my command." She paused, searching their faces for some sign of understanding. "I want to unite this galaxy, not divide it. The old empire fell because it was driven by greed and hunger for power. I have no interest in that. My interest is in peace, in unity. I will not lead with fear. I will lead with strength, but strength tempered with compassion." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, Ambassador Coralin, the Rylac representative, spoke. She had always been one of Lena's strongest supporters, though even her face was etched with doubt. "And if others choose to challenge your power," she asked, her voice measured, "what will you do when those who don't agree with you rise against you?" Lena felt her heart skip a beat. She had feared this moment, the moment when the galaxy would test her resolve, the moment when they would demand answers she couldn't easily give. "I will listen," Lena said, her voice calm but firm. "I will listen to those who disagree, and I will find a way to resolve our differences, but I will not allow anyone to tear this galaxy apart." The silence was deafening. The tension in the room was palpable as the council members exchanged looks, unsure of how to proceed. Finally, Zelkin spoke again, his voice softer but no less commanding. "We will not stand idle and allow one person to decide the fate of us all." His eyes locked with Lena. "But we will stand by the one who leads us with conviction, with honor. If you are that leader, Lena Ivana Salas, then show us." Lena nodded slowly, her eyes filled with determination. I will show you." As the meeting came to an end, Lena walked out of the chamber, her mind racing. She had said the words she needed to say, but the road ahead was uncertain. There was still a long way to go. The galaxy was divided, and not everyone would agree with her vision. But she knew one thing for sure: she could not turn back now. Lena looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. The power of the orbital fortress was hers, but it wasn't just about strength. It was about unity, about proving that power could be used for peace, not domination. And she would prove it. The tension in the galaxy was palpable, like the stillness before a storm. Lena Ivana Salas stood at the heart of the orbital fortress, looking out at the stars, the weight of her decisions pressing heavily on her shoulders. The Galactic Council had given her a chance, but now it was clear the road ahead would be filled with more than just diplomatic negotiations. She had convinced them to give her a chance, to trust in her leadership, but trust was fragile, and the galaxy's wounds ran deep. The rebellion that had started in whispers was now beginning to take shape, growing louder with each passing day. It wasn't just the Rithari or the Krylian factions who were afraid of her power. It was the smaller colonies, the ones that had always fought to stay out of galactic politics. They were starting to push back, to question Lena's right to control the vast power of the orbital fortress. Lena had known this moment would come. Power was never something easily accepted, especially in the hands of one who hadn't earned it in the eyes of others. She had acted with compassion, with strength, but now she could feel the walls closing in. The galaxy wasn't ready for her vision, and the more she tried to bring peace, the more they seemed to push her into a corner. The call came in the middle of the night, pulling Lena from a restless sleep. The voice of Ambassador Zelkin crackled over the comm, his voice urgent. "Lena," he said, his tone serious, "the rebellion has begun. The Tzarii remnants, along with several smaller factions, are gathering near the Vornes cluster. They claim you've taken too much power and that the galaxy's future should not rest in the hands of one person, especially not in the hands of someone who rules through force." Lena's heart sank. The rebellion had already spread like wildfire. It wasn't just words now. Ships were mobilizing, forces were preparing for war. "How many factions are involved?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Too many to count, and the situation is escalating quickly," Zelkin replied. "They're calling for a new council, a council that will lead the galaxy, not one individual." The cold chill of reality settled over Lena. It was happening. The galaxy that she had hoped to unite was starting to split again. She had worked tirelessly to build trust, to show them that her vision was for the greater good. But now it was slipping through her fingers. Lena walked to the war room, her mind racing. She didn't have time to waste. The rebellion was a threat, but it was also an opportunity. She had to act quickly, not just to protect the fortress, but to protect the fragile unity she had fought for. The choice was clear. Either she crushed the rebellion with force, or she sought another way, one that could still preserve peace. The map of the galaxy glowed in front of her, showing the positions of the rebel factions, their fleets moving toward the Vornes cluster. The orbital fortress was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. If they attacked, the galaxy would burn. Mara Ishin entered the room, her face tense. "We need to act, Lena. The longer we wait, the stronger they become. If we don't stop them now, we'll lose everything." Lena turned to her. "I know, but I can't just wipe them out. That would prove them right. The last empire ruled with force, and look where it got them. If I do that, I'll become what they fear most. I'll become a tyrant." Mara crossed her arms, clearly conflicted. "What are you saying?" Lena's gaze hardened as she stared at the holographic map. "We need to meet with them. I'm not going to force them into submission, but I'll make them see that I am their only chance for unity. If they want a new council, we'll build it together. But they must see that the future of the galaxy depends on us working together, not tearing each other apart." Mara's eyes softened with understanding. "You're willing to risk everything for peace." Lena nodded, a sense of resolve settling in. "If we don't find a way to work together, the galaxy will fall into chaos again. I won't let that happen." Hours later, Lena stood before a gathering of the rebellion leaders, the tension in the air thick. The Tzarii remnants, the Krylian, the Rathari, and several other factions had gathered in the meeting room aboard the orbital fortress. They were wary, distrustful, their eyes filled with suspicion as Lena entered the room. They had seen what the power of the fortress could do, and they were afraid. But Lena wasn't here to threaten them. She was here to offer a choice. "I know why you're here," she said, her voice steady. "You're afraid of the power I hold and afraid of what that power could mean for the future of the galaxy. But I'm not here to take control. I'm here to offer you a partnership." The room was silent, the leaders exchanging glances. Ambassador Zelkin, the Rathari representative, spoke up. "You speak of partnership, but your actions tell another story. You wiped out the Tzarii fleet without warning. You used the fortress as a weapon. How can we trust you?" Lena stepped forward, her eyes locking with his. "Because I've done something none of you have been able to do. I've protected the galaxy from those who would see it destroyed. But if we are to build something new, something lasting, we must do it together. I will not rule alone. The power of the orbital fortress is not for one person. It is for all of us." The tension in the room was still thick, but Lena could see the flickers of doubt in their eyes. They didn't trust her yet, but she could feel the faintest stirrings of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could bring them together. The meeting lasted hours, but in the end, Lena's words had made an impact. The factions were divided, but they were no longer as united in their rebellion. Some had begun to see the possibility of cooperation. Others were still doubtful, still fearful. But there was a glimmer of something new, something she hadn't seen before. Lena had avoided war for now, but she knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The galaxy was divided and the rebellion wasn't over. But Lena had given them a choice, a path toward peace. Whether they walked it or not was up to them. As she walked out of the meeting room, Lena allowed herself a moment of reflection. She wasn't sure if she was the leader they needed, but she knew she was the leader they had. She would do whatever it took to make this work, even if it meant putting herself on the line. The stars outside the fortress seemed distant again, but in the silence of space, Lena knew that no matter how hard the road ahead, she would never give up. The galaxy still had hope, and she would fight to keep it. The galaxy would see who Lena Ivana Salas truly was.